So, our first video for a while here on the channel. Apologies for that. A really busy time since the consulates have kicked into life in the UK, and there's been a lot of people now. We've got a lot of people come in who have capital gains liabilities. Maybe I need to come in the second half of the year. Maybe we'll do a video on that as well at one point with a tax guy. But anyway, here we are, our next video. And this video I am going to break down into three parts, and must apologise for the rings in my eyes. See, now I've got this professional €25 ring light, and now I can see the reflection. And apparently the Upsticks in the back, when you see the video, it's in the wrong way around, but who cares? One day we'll get a social media guy for all that business, but at the moment it's the content that's needed, isn't it? So I want to read, I was really intrigued by a comment that I got on one of my videos, and I'd like to thank very much Mr. Paul Hanson, who commented on a video, because all these comments make my mind tick and gives us subjects to talk about as well. And I'm going to go straight in and read what he said. So he said, really enjoying the content of your videos, thanks Paul. After taking early retirement 18 months ago, and with the dust settling post-Brexit, we are considering a move abroad, and Spain is our first consideration due to climate and ease of travel from the UK. Given the unpredictable outcome impacts of the war in Ukraine, we don't feel that the time is right at present to sell up and buy a property in Spain. However, we believe purchasing a relatively low-cost apartment near the coast may be a good interim step and visit for the 2 times 90 periods. Have you any thoughts or advice on such consideration? Great comment. Okay, so thanks for enjoying the videos there, Paul. It's great to know that people out there are watching, and it's great to know that we're helping. Evidently, I mean, we're not going to lie, this channel does help get us business. People come to us from the channel and then they engage and pay us to help them. But another one of our objectives is just to get the information out there, and you know, the demographic of clients has changed in the last 2 years, where we were always used to dealing with people who are already in Spain, and now we're moving more towards putting content out there for people who have never lived here before. So this really got me interested in this question. I went on to reply, hi Paul, thank you so much for watching, commenting on our videos. Your question is worthy of a video. Watch your space, here it is. He replied back to me, thank you Chris, I'm looking forward to that and humbled by your response. No doubt there are many people in a similar situation but are a little nervous about going all in. It's very, very true, extremely true. And I have so many conversations with people about the golden visa, and people who are looking to spend more than 80% of their whole capital wealth of all their money that they have, you know, everything, cashing it all in, buying a property to gain residency, when they could perhaps work on a non-lucrative visa structure, you know, depending on what they're doing. Certainly retiring, I don't think it's a good idea sometimes to go all in, you know, straight away. You have to be very certain, and we always edge on the side of caution, you know, making sure that people don't make rash decisions. So yeah, that's true. Who would like to know more about the pros and cons of a holiday home versus permanent residence, especially in the areas of tax, medical insurance, and general understanding of property taxes and buying and selling? Is there a big loss financially if you sold an apartment and then purchased a more expensive property with permanent residence in mind? Many thanks. Now, what I'm going to do is, because this has been going around in my head as I drive home on how we can approach this video, because we're not really property people, but I can tell you, I'll give you a lot of information about the pros and cons. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to continue with the video, and we're going to first give you some information regarding buying a property as a non-resident, pros and cons, versus renting long-term as a non-resident, pros and cons. So here we go. So first of all, let's talk about buying a property as a non-resident, as a sort of a test out. Are you going to like Spain? Are you going to use it within the 180-day period? And what that involves and what liabilities you have. So I've written myself a few notes here, and these notes also come from speaking to a few friends as well. So this is a great topic I want to talk about on the channel. So the first thing is, obviously, when as a non-resident, evidently you can buy a property, that's not a problem, as long as you have an NIE number and you're registered with the tax office. Evidently, we always advise you get a good conveyancing lawyer and a good lawyer from your area. Each area is different. Each lawyer will have a relationship with the local land registry departments, the various departments that's needed to complete the operation of a house sale. So, certainly, nowadays on Google and forums, you can certainly see everybody's exposed, everybody's got a channel, most people have. If you've got a lawyer who isn't anywhere on social media, hasn't got a Google rating and hasn't got a YouTube channel, probably not the best thing in the world. So definitely look for a decent conveyancing lawyer and one who's used to the area. So if you're looking to buy a property, the first thing evidently is when you purchase a property, there is purchase tax on it. Now here in Andalusia, again, we're not conveyancing lawyers, so I'm just throwing this out my head really, but I believe it's 7% here in Andalusia, and most people say that you can expect around 10% costs, including the lawyer, the notary and everything else by the time you've finished an operation of purchasing a property. So say you're purchasing a property for 200 grand, then you could look at 10% costs of around 20 grand. Okay, so which brings me on to my next thing, which is how long do you plan to keep that property? So by the time you've bought that property, you're already 10k down. Okay, so I've got cost of the property versus appreciation. Now in Spain, as we know, the property market is slightly different in the UK, where when buying, in the UK evidently the property market dips and rises, but generally it's always slightly like that. And you pretty much know in the UK, if you buy a property in a decent area, that if you hold on to it, eventually it's going to appreciate in cost. In Spain, in value, sorry. In Spain, that's not always the case. Pre-crisis, 2008 crisis, there's still properties which haven't reached that value from pre-2008 yet. They're just getting there now because we're also in a bit of a hike at the moment in property prices. So they're getting back there, but there's a lot of properties which are just not even reached what they were worth in 2008. So what you've got to look at is the area where you are buying and the appreciation of the property. Because if you want to buy it and keep it for 1 year, then sell it, unless that property appreciates by 10%, you're going to lose money. Okay, so that's for sure. All right. So there's more favourable areas. So, for example, if you were to buy a property in the middle of Fuengirola, Fuengirola, then you're more likely to sell that property, and maybe make some money on it. Certainly from last year to this year, if you bought one last year and you're selling it this year, you make money because they're very sought after. But it might not be the nicest apartment if it's right in the middle of Fuengirola, and it might be very noisy. Versus an apartment maybe on the coast, further down in a quieter area, might be a lot nicer but harder to sell. So you've got to look at the cost versus appreciation for the time that you intend to keep that property. Okay. Moving on to my next note, which we made this yesterday, which was cost versus earning potential. So, okay, you've bought the property, let's call it 200 grand, you've spent your 20 grand, so you're in for 20 grand. The first saving you've got, evidently, is when you come over, you're not going to be spending money on rent. You're not going to be spending money on holiday lets, you're not going to be spending money on actually getting your head down here in Spain. And if you work your 90, 180 days really well, it means you can spend up to around 6 months of the year in Spain without paying any rent. So you want to look at that and think immediately, well, I've already done 20k, but normally I would spend 5 or 6k in actually renting a property. And you can also keep your personal belongings there, so that's good, right? That's obviously a saving. Earning potential is how about you rent the property out when you're not there? Do you set the property up as a holiday rental and then rent it out when you're not there? Okay, this is a possibility. And this year we are seeing crazy prices, absolutely mad prices. I think people paying 2k for an apartment that's falling to bits on the beach because they just can't get in anywhere else. So yeah, there is the potential, definitely don't abuse people, but potential to put up a holiday rental, and then you essentially book the time that you want in your own apartment. Now there's management companies that do things like this. You can, depending on your area, you go to a management company, say, hey, this is my apartment, okay, I want to rent it out, They will manage it. They'll also advise you what you need to do. So there's holiday licenses, there's maybe aircon to put in. I believe in Andalusia they've taken that out now. But anyway, they'll advise you about the requirements, and they will essentially rent it out for you, take their percentage and pay you. Now, if you are earning money, it's going to come on to the tax liabilities in a minute, on holiday rentals, and you will need to declare that income normally quarterly on a non-residence tax, basically. Okay, but you have got earning potential. So if you've got imagine you bought this 200k apartment, you're 20 grand in the hole for taxes and costs, but you've already saved yourself 6k, because that's what you would have spent on coming over on holiday during the 6 months that you're going to absolutely rinse your 90, 180, so you're going to spend 6 months here, so you've already saved that, and you've got the property rented out for holiday rentals. And you know, sometimes in the summer, if you don't fancy being here in the really hot months, it can take 4 or 5 grand maybe a month. So maybe you do 2 months at 10 grand, and you take the tax off of that, you come away with whatever you come away with. You've probably covered at least 10 or 15 grand there. So if you get the property for 2 years, suddenly you're looking at green numbers. Okay, so yeah, but then what you've got to look at is your liabilities and the costs which are involved in actually owning a property and managing a property. So first of all, obviously you've got your property management. If you can actually even find somebody to do it, I definitely wouldn't suggest you do it yourself. You will need a decent accountant or a gestor to manage your accounts, your non-residence account. Okay, do not try and do it yourself. It's a nightmare. In Spain in general, don't try and do taxes yourself. Find a decent professional to do it for you. 23 years, I've never done my own taxes, and touch wood, I have a very good friend of mine who I've been working with for 16 years. He's amazing. He always looks out for me, does all my taxes, the business, the family, everything we need to do, and he manages it for us, and for a very reasonable fee. Okay, so definitely find yourself a decent tax guy. Don't try and deal with the tax office yourself. All right, so you've also got your IBI, which is your property tax. Now, depending on where you live, property tax higher or lower. The good news is that is normally less than in the UK. You've also got your bills, so you have your electric, your water, maybe community charge as well. Again, electric's gone down here. Water generally isn't too bad. Community charges really depends where you buy. Be very careful. Make sure your conveyancing lawyer checks out the situation of the community. Don't get lumped with any bills from past owners. Internet. Now, this is something where you'll be paying for internet for 6 months of the year when you're not there. You don't know. Okay, so one good thing is there's providers like Lobster, okay, who are, when I go on holiday, I use my phone as when I go on holiday. It's been a while since I've been on holiday, but when I do go, we all connect to my phone as the hub. I up the package to the 30 gigs, whatever they offer us, and if it costs me like 30 euros or something, we connect to that, use that as a router basically, and we never have a problem. And then when I come back to the office and back to normal life, I just knock it back down to the small packages. So you do have that. Or nowadays, to be honest, broadband isn't that expensive in Spain. It's cheap. The price has gone down, so that's good. The other thing you've got to look at is obviously security. Okay, you will need an alarm in your property to protect against ocupas. Ocupas are people who break in and live into your property, squatters. I think they're in the UK. It's a very common thing here, unfortunately. If you've got an alarm, it notifies the police. You'd need to contact them, maybe a management company, to address that if you're not here. Again, if it's a gated community, generally doesn't happen. But if you live, if you're not in a gated community, it's definitely a good idea to have an alarm. But you need an internet for an alarm. All these things you've got to consider. Also, the last thing is, what is your support network? So if you're not there, who is going to go and fix the dripping tap when the neighbour's saying there's something leaking over my balcony? Got to look at your support network. Okay, so what we've got there, just to summarise, on buying an apartment, you've got cost versus appreciation, cost versus earning potential, and then you've got cost versus liabilities. Sit down with a piece of paper and write all three of those down. And now we're going to move on to renting long term. So, and the next one is long-term renting as a non-resident. Okay, here in Spain, to get your foot in the door and get an idea of where you want to live, to have a more permanent base without actually having residency. So it's sort of a discovery long-term rental. But the first thing is, can you get a long-term rental as a non-resident? Not always. That's the truth. So it depends, evidently, who you're renting off, whether they'll accept a non-resident and the proof of income from a non-resident. Because evidently someone who's rented a property out, if you're a non-resident and you live in the UK, if you decide not to pay your bills, then they may not have any legal recourse over you in the local courts to claim that back. Evidently, it's not something that anybody who's watching this channel will ever do, but you know, people are very cautious about renting to non-residents. Definitely, for sure, you will need a NIE number. I'm pretty sure of that. Again, depends who you're renting off. They might be happy to draft up a contract without an NIE number, but most people now request an NIE number. So, can you get a rental? It depends on the area. That's first of all, and the person who's renting the property. It's definitely not as easy as a non-resident as it is for a resident. Okay, the next thing is really the cost liability of having a rental. So evidently, we've spoken about if you own a property, you won't have to spend any money on a rental, on the actual renting of the property. But obviously, if you've got a long-term rental, every month you're going to have an outgoing, which is initially the rent, and you will still have to pay the utilities. Now, if you're not using it for parts of the year, those utilities you would expect were very low, but in Spain there is a standard charge for having the utilities connected, and you would have to pay that. Again, it depends on the area where you are, the size of the apartment or place that you're renting, to how much that costs. So I've just check my notes now. So we've got the cost, the cost versus rented. So you've got to look at, obviously we spoke about when we're talking about buying a property, the 20%, how do you recoup that 20%, and can you recoup it either from income or appreciation of the property? With rental, you're not going to be recuperating any of that rental money, but you might be earning money potentially for the future by getting used to the area where you're going to go. So if you spend 12 months in a rental that costs you, say, £1,000 a month, so 12 grand liability plus the bills, etc., etc., call it a 14 grand liability for the whole year, but you have freedom to come in and out to that rental as much as you like within your Schengen allowance, then are you going to be able to do the research to, if you're looking for a property, if you're looking for a permanent place to live, it's going to save you money if you decide it's not for you, because it's worth spending 12 grand on having a place in Spain to ultimately decide I don't want to live here, instead of going to all the hassle of getting a visa, getting here, and then knowing that. Will it save you money on a property purchase? It may do. And what do I mean by that? You being here, being on the ground, you can see the offers, you can see the deals, you can speak to the estate agents, and you've got one foot in the door. Certainly easier than doing it online. And I truly believe that if you have got your nose in as such, that you will be able to save money on a property purchase, by negotiating, by dealing, and whether you can save up to your liability of the 12 grand we're talking about. If you're spending €1,000 a month on rent, I don't know, but that would be a target. So if you spend 7 grand on rent for the year, your target should be, if you're looking to purchase a property afterwards, to maybe get 7 grand off the purchase price, by your experience, so you're just something, it's not going to be negotiable if you haven't got your foot in the door. But say, for example, you sat in an estate agent, and you know that they've got somebody who's desperate to sell a property or wants to sell a property, and there's a buyer actually there, and they're saying, look, we want a deal, because it's normal to broker a deal. You may save that money that you've invested on the rental. Is there the possibility of your friends and family using it? There may be. Again, this is a negotiation with the person who's renting the property to you. Certainly, subletting on a long-term rental is normally not allowed. Letting members of the friends and family use your apartment and maybe give you a tickle to cover the costs, maybe. I don't know. Definitely, I'm not definitely telling you not to do anything illegal, but evidently, if they allow you to have friends and family, those friends and family fill up your fridge and make sure your petrol's covered, that shouldn't be a problem. What does rental give you? What else did we come up with our conversations yesterday? Flexibility of where you want to be. Having a rental gives you flexibility, because after a year you can move somewhere else. That could save you money from making a costly mistake and buying somewhere where ultimately you don't want to be. Okay. What other things we've got? Not insured of IBI liability. Oh, there we go. Yes, so you've got no IBI liability, no house tax liability, and no property insurance liability, because this is covered by the landlord, so that's a good thing. And you do have your utilities. So there is one other thing to raise about rentals. It's quite popular, and this could work for many people. Again, we were talking about it yesterday. I was talking to a estate agent about it yesterday, pre-making this video, is that on a 90, 180 day structure, what they're finding is obviously the months of June, July, August are being booked out because people want to take advantage of their properties to get the most money from holiday rentals. But the other 9 months of the year, people are quite willing to rent out their property long term. And a lot of people who are looking to fall into the 90, 180 rule don't want to be here in June, July and August because it's too hot. They prefer to be in the UK. So what we're seeing now for the first time this year, well, we're not seeing it, to be honest with you, the estate agent that I spoke to mentioned this, is that there's people who are still renting long term, like the Swallows used to back in the day, and then just leaving, you know, the property empty, you know, while they're making up their days. So, you know, they're having the 9 month rental during the winter, autumn, and spring periods, but the summer period, evidently, they're not coming because it's far too hot anyway. They're balancing their days and are still deciding when they're going to be here. So that might be an option, and certainly you can get a property maybe slightly cheaper than if you're renting it all year round during the summer period as well. So anyway, that is basically it. That is our buy before visa and rent for visa as a non-resident sort of summary. I really hope that's helped. Paul, if you've got any other questions, please let me know. Thank you so much for watching the channel. I hope that has given you a bit more of an insight, and yeah, if you do want to know anything about your non-lucrative visa residency in Spain, then please subscribe. Somewhere over here and below are all our contact details where you can book a call and get in touch, and we'll be happy to talk to you. Thanks for watching.